Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jim Dean. I'm the Dean of UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School, and it's my privilege to welcome you to the final event in this year's Dean Speaker Series. The Dean Speaker Series was created to bring to our campus outstanding scholars and leaders from the fields of business, education, and government to share thoughts and insights with UNC Kenan-Flagler, the university, and the community at large. The Dean Speaker Series is made possible through the support of the Archie K. Davis Endowment and is managed primarily by our students, who select and invite the leaders whom they are most interested in learning from. Tonight's lecture is a special event because it's the signature event of the Global Innovations in Energy Conference, which I know many of you are attending, and is part of the 10-year anniversary celebration of our Center for Sustainable Enterprise. We welcome all of you who are attending the conference and thank you for your support. I'd particularly like to mention our friend and alum, Bob Eves, husband of Governor Bev Perdue, who has joined us this evening, and I've lost him. There he is. Okay, welcome, Bob. Thank you. Wonderful to have you here. Tonight we're delighted to welcome Jim Rogers. Jim has been chairman, CEO, and president of Duke Energy since January 2007, following the merger of Duke Energy and Synergy. He has more than 21 years of experience as a utility CEO. Jim is also chairman of the Institute for Electric Efficiency and the Edison Foundation. He serves on the boards of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the Edison Electric Institute. He is also a member of the Honorary Committee of the Joint U.S.-China Collaboration on Clean Energy. The January 5th, 2009 edition of Newsweek named Jim to the Global Elite List, the 50 most powerful people in the world, saying the CEO of Duke Energy could make dreams of renewable power a reality. Following tonight's speech, Professor Al Seegers, Faculty Director of the Center for Sustainable Enterprise, RBC Bank Distinguished Professor, and Chair of Strategy and Entrepreneurship here at UNC Kenan-Flagler, will offer a vote of thanks on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students. Please join me in welcoming to Kenan-Flagler, Jim Rogers.
Dean, thank you very much. I am delighted to be here tonight. I appreciate the honor of being your last speaker. I'm not sure what that means exactly. The last one this year, the first for next year. But no, I am very delighted to be here and do appreciate this opportunity. Tonight, I'm really going to talk about sustainability. I'm going to talk about climate change. I'm going to talk about the role of utilities and the changing role of utilities. And I'm going to talk about the future, which is always a very dangerous thing to do. But first, before I do that, I just want to say how much I appreciate, and I guess more importantly, what I would like to do is congratulate the Center for Sustainable Enterprise. It's their 10th year anniversary, and I think they have a very noble mission. We at Duke share that mission. I can say Duke here, can I? Okay. Just wanted to be sure. We define sustainability as doing business in a way that's good for people, the planet, and profits. This Thursday, we celebrate the 40th anniversary of Earth Day, so it's important we talk about these issues, and it's very timely for our discussion tonight. Let me ask you to think back to 1910. Raise your hand if you can remember 1910. I guess I'm the only one in the room that remembers it. But if you think back to 1910, that was the era before there was electricity. That was an era where you burned coal and wood in the fireplaces of oftentimes every room in your house. That was a period when you had kerosene lights. That's a period when you looked around your community. Think about what Pittsburgh looked like, or Cleveland looked like, or Detroit looked like, or any major city looked, with the smog, the smoke that existed in those cities. Think about life at that time. And then we made up our mind as a country that we needed to provide universal access to electricity to the people of America. And companies like ours were formed. Regulatory regimes were developed at the state level. And for the 20th century, it was our mission to provide universal access to electricity. It's hard to even imagine what life was like before that. I sometimes think if I could just cut the lights off to my customers for about a week, it'd give them a good memory of that. Of course, I'd never do that. But the fact is, think about where we are today versus where we were then. Think about the fact that virtually everybody in America has access to electricity today. How important is that? Well, there are 1.6 billion people, 5 times the number of people in America have access to do not have access to electricity, and yet we do. Think about the fact that the real price of electricity has been flat for the last 50 years. Can you name anything where the real price has been flat for the last 50 years? Universal access, affordable, the reliability, we deliver 99.99% of the time. Clean, well, think how much we cleaned up those cities. And think about how much we've cleaned up our power plants, particularly our coal plants, since 1970 and the Clean Air Act amendments in 1990. My mission is to provide affordable, reliable, clean electricity 24/7, 365 days a year. But universal access to electricity was our mission. We achieved our mission. But think back to 1910. Who at that time could have imagined that electricity would enable what it enabled? It was a great enabler. It enabled MRIs and X-rays and laser surgery, and walk to a hospital and walk through a hospital. None of that would exist today without electricity. It enabled computers, the internet. Think how transformative that was. It enabled television and radio. Think how transformative they have been in the life of our country. None of that was envisioned when we started down the road to provide universal access. And in 2000, the National Academy of Engineers, chaired by Neil Armstrong, who, by the way, served on my board for over a decade, looked back over the 20th century and asked the question, what was the greatest engineering achievement of the 20th century? And the National Academy said, the electrification of America. Not a man to the moon, not telephone, not internet, not computers, not any of those things. And I have to tell you, that was a great achievement for our industry. I say that to you to set the stage. Sounds a little bit like bragging. But it's a great achievement for our industry, but that was about then. What I want to talk about is now and the future going forward, because that's about what we've achieved. And by the way, having Neil Armstrong on your board, when you had a really close vote, what I always did was start the presentation with one small step. I sometimes even got his vote with that. But my point is that was about the past. But as we stand here today, looking to the future, that was what we achieved. But the question is, our mission is changing. I believe that our mission in the 21st century is two things. One is to modernize and decarbonize our fleet, and that's an imperative for us because by 2050, virtually every power plant, with the exception of some hydro, we will have to retire and replace. So the question is, what will we retire and replace them with? What's the sequence? So that's one of the reasons I've been such an advocate for carbon regulation, for cap and trade, to get going, to put a price on carbon, put a cap on emissions, to understand what the regulations are going to be on SOx, NOx, and mercury, and what the regulations will be on mountaintop mining, so that I could make an informed decision as I retire and replace all these plants over the next 40 years. So it's important to have the roadmap in place. And I'll come back and talk more about that in a moment. But that's one of our missions: modernize, decarbonize. I believe the second mission is to make the communities we serve the most energy efficient in the world. Now, the other day, I wrote a memo to my board. I write a memo to my board every month, something I started a number of years ago. It sometimes feels more like a curse than an opportunity to communicate with my board about important issues. But it's really been a great discipline for me in terms of focusing on issues. I read in an article where a guy was quoted as saying, "I wake up every morning wondering what I was dead wrong about." And then I said, well, what if I wrote to my board, and I later turned it into an op-ed, what if I woke up tomorrow morning and somebody presented me irrefutable evidence that climate change was not a problem? I think it is. Would I change anything that I'm doing in the running of our business? And the answer is no. One, on modernizing our fleet, I have to do that by 2050 anyway. So decarbonization is going to be a part of it or not. And if it wasn't a problem, I would still have to do it. And secondly, I would make the communities we serve the most energy efficient, because I know, as you know, that the battle over scarce resources in the world is going to be fierce between now and 2050. First, we have 1.6 billion people with no access to electricity, as I mentioned before. They need access. They need access to the modern world. Also, the world's population today is about 6.5 billion. It's going to go to 9 billion by 2050. And we're going to have to provide electricity to those people. Most of them are in India and China. And the reality is we will supply electricity to them. So even if carbon wasn't the problem that it is, or the issue that it is, even if it wasn't, I would move forward trying to achieve those two objectives. I say that to you to say, as a businessman, I listen to the scientists. I know there's been a climate gate and issues about climate. The truth of the matter is we have to respect and honor and listen to scientists. My single greatest fear about this whole thing is that at the end of the day, the credibility of scientists is undermined, and all through our society, we depend on scientists. We depend on scientists with respect to medicine, to virtually every aspect of our life, there's a scientific basis for it. And if we can't trust scientists, because I've always believed scientists make objective decisions based on facts, not political facts. And I believe at the end of the day that this has created and undermined the role of scientists throughout the world in every area, not just in the climate area. So I hope all of this gets resolved and we get on the right road with respect to it. So the mission for the 21st century is clear to me. But here's what is not clear to me. In the same way we stood in 1910 and didn't know what would be enabled by universal access to electricity, we do not know today what will be enabled as a consequence of decarbonization and modernization, and we really don't know what will be enabled as a consequence of going from an analog grid to a smart grid, as a consequence of providing energy efficiency to our customers and helping them with productivity gains in the use of electricity. We have no sense of what will be enabled. Sure, I can see plug-in hybrids. I can see that as something that will be enabled as a result of a smart grid. I can see all these apps developing as a consequence of having a smart meter, which is no more than a two-way communication device. I can see and envision the idea of us writing software, understanding the algorithms of our customers' usage, and being able to, consistent with their comfort and convenience criteria, to actually design a software package that optimizes the use of electricity within the home. I can also envision us optimizing the use of each of your homes with all the homes in a total geography, as well as against industrial, as well as against the grid. I can envision that, but there are many things that I've yet to envision or can be envisioned as we stand here today, thinking about what will happen as we go forward. There are three driving factors, I believe, that will determine how we move and how fast we move and what we do. One is public policy. We have got to get the right public policy at the federal level with respect to climate. We have to get the right public policy at the state level. We have to get the right regulations in place, both at the federal and the state level. We have to develop the regulatory framework and, in a sense, the roadmap for us to make billions and billions of dollars of investments going forward. The second thing is really technology, because technologies are being developed today that I believe will be transformative to our future. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And thirdly, I believe the 2050 mandate is real, and the modernization of our grid is a real challenge that we have. And all three of these drivers are really going to move us forward in a way that will create value for our customers. As I said a moment ago, job one for me is to provide affordable, reliable, clean electricity 24/7, 365 days a year. But the toughest part about that job is simply balancing the goals of affordability, reliability, and clean. I don't have the luxury of looking through just the clean lens. I don't have the luxury of looking just through the affordability lens, nor just the reliability lens. Some in the environmental community and the consumer group community would urge me to see the world through their lenses, and I do. But at the end of the day, I have to balance those interests. It is not as simple as flipping a switch, but we have to manage and make complex trade-offs to achieve that affordable, reliable, clean goals. Let me spend a moment or two talking about the trade-offs, because there is no simple way to do this. For instance, there are 5 ways to make electricity. You can do it with renewables, which are solar, wind, biomass. You can do it with energy efficiency. You can do it with coal, with natural gas, with nuclear. But there is no perfect choice. Each has pluses and minuses, and when you score them against affordable, reliable, and clean, you get different answers. Take coal. Affordable, reliable, not clean at all. And in terms of emissions of SOx, NOx, mercury, and CO2, and then there's all the upstream issues in terms of mining of coal and the transport of coal. And the accident we had in West Virginia is kind of an illustration of some of the sacrifices that are made to make sure we have coal available to generate electricity. Let's not also forget that 50% of the electricity in this country comes from coal. So we're not going to make that transformation overnight. But take natural gas. Some people are trumpeting that as the answer. It is the game changer because they found shale gas. And the answer there is maybe not. The jury's out with respect to whether the shale gas is there. The jury is out as to the environmental impacts, because when you do horizontal drilling and you do fracking, you have to use a tremendous amount of water, a tremendous amount of chemicals, and you don't really know at the end of the day, because every formation's different, you really don't know whether or not you will lead to contamination of an aquifer, or what the implication will be. More research needs to be done with respect to the environmental impact. Now, gas is kind of an interesting option. I'm a guy who started my career in the gas business. You'd think I would be a true believer. All my clients, when I practiced law in Washington, were gas producers. And they wouldn't like for me to hear me say this, but gas has got kind of an interesting history in our country. I suspect there are very few people in this room that realize that in 1978, kind of a year after I went to Washington, they passed a law that prohibited the burning of natural gas to generate electricity, because it was a premium fuel and we were running out of it. That was the law of our country from 78 to 85. The other thing few people realize, I suspect, is the price of gas has been incredibly volatile. I mean, just in the last 2 years, it's been as high as $11 or $12 and down to $3 or $4. So there's been huge swings, and when you have huge swings of gas prices and you're dependent on gas to generate electricity, guess what you have in your pricing? Volatility. That's not a good thing. Consumers like a smooth trajectory and a predictable trajectory with respect to the price of electricity. But I think gas has got plus and minuses. People talk about it as a clean fuel, but think about it. 50%, it has 50% of the carbon footprint of coal. So if I shut down all my coal plants and convert them all to natural gas, I would not be able to achieve the Waxman-Markey targets of a 70 to 80% reduction in carbon. So while gas will play an important role, as coal will play a role, they both have shortcomings. Even wind and solar. I mean, think about it. It's not very affordable. In fact, it's very expensive. And you only get power when the wind blows and when the sun shines. People, much to my happiness, have gotten comfortable with throwing a switch and having the lights come on when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. So yes, renewables will play a role Battery technology will accelerate the role they play, but I think it will be a limited role as we look back from 2050 to now. And that's I throw that out as a little raw meat for you, because I know there'll be a Q&A session. But my view is there pluses and minuses to all these, and none of them match up perfectly with affordable, reliable, clean. Renewables are not reliable. They're expensive, not as affordable, but they're very clean, unlike coal, unlike natural gas. And then there's nuclear. Nuclear is actually the only technology today that produces electricity 24/7 with zero greenhouse gases. Zero SOx, zero NOx, zero mercury. It's as clean as it gets. But even with nuclear, it's expensive. It's very reliable. It's very clean. But there's an unanswered question if you do a life cycle analysis of what do you do with the used fuel. And I think there's some answers that need to be developed with respect to that. Energy efficiency obviously is a good thing, and we need to invest in that, and that will play a critical role and should be the first thing that we try to invest our money in and create technologies for. The reason I took time to walk through those is to say there's no perfect fuel, there's no perfect way to achieve affordable, reliable, and clean, and if we're going to cross a bridge to a low-carbon world, we're going to have technological advances, underscore technological advances in all the ways we generate electricity to have a low-carbon economy. So we've got lots of work to do in terms of that development. The other point that I would make that I think is very important to keep in mind as we do this is that we also can't rule any out. There's some that would like to say no to coal. And there's some that would like to say no to natural gas or no to nuclear. But the fact of the matter is you can't say no to any of them going forward. Let me turn on the three drivers and spend some time on those drivers. As I said, the first is federal and state policy. We need environmental regulations on CO2. There's 28 weeks, who's counting, to the midterm elections. The sooner we act, the House has passed a bill, Senate is working on a bill, and the fact of the matter is virtually every major piece of environmental legislation ever passed by Congress has been approved overwhelmingly in a bipartisan manner. And given how poisonous the atmosphere is now, and given how partisan the health care bill was, how partisan the bill is with respect to financial regulation, and the intervention of a new Supreme Court justice decision to be made, the conventional wisdom in Washington is the Senate doesn't act this year. Now, I've been on the phone today working with people in Washington, and the fact of the matter is we're working very hard to get a bipartisan effort out of the Senate with Senators Kerry, Lieberman, and Graham, and try to build up a bipartisan coalition to get it done. But if we don't get it done this year, we start all over in the next session. And some have said to me, if we don't get it done, and this is the important point, if we don't get it done this year, we might not get it done to 2013. And for a person in my position who wants the roadmap, who needs to go to work, who needs to provide the solutions, I think that's the wrong answer. Because it's very important to have a clear way forward. And doing just the energy bill is not enough. And I think the stimulus and federal funding is important. But let me make an important point. With a national debt of $14 trillion, with a deficit of 1.3, We need to come up with federal guidelines and put private money to work. Let me give you, for instance, our company alone raised $7 billion in the last 2 years at 5% with various maturities. It's the cheapest money I've seen in my 21-year career as CEO. I wish I could just borrow more of it. Because if I could borrow more of it, our business is the most capital intensive in the United States. And I spend $25 billion over the next 5 years, which is greater than our market cap. And I need access to capital. And if I can get it at low prices, that allows me to keep my rates down, because while rates have been flat for the last 50 years, I envision the rates of electricity going up in real terms. Because over the next 40 years, if you're going to retire old plants and build new ones, if you're going to modernize your grid, if you're going to incorporate higher price renewables in your mix, you're going to drive prices up. That's just the reality of life. And our projections show they go up faster in real terms than the economy or inflation. So I want to go to work now and spend the money, start the process, because I also know what the dean didn't mention. One of my first jobs in my career was a consumer advocate fighting rate increases of utility companies. I've really come a long way. But I haven't forgotten the lessons. And one of the lessons is find a way to smooth the rate increase out over time. And one of the reasons that we're doing a series of things today is to smooth rate increases out over time. And let me kind of tell you what that means. We're building a coal plant here in North Carolina. It hadn't been very controversial. I mean, people have dumped coal in my front yard. They put posters on my house. If I knew they were coming, I'd have served them coffee or tea. I'd have been delighted to talk to them. But the bottom line is that we built that plant, 800 megawatts, because we knew we'd be able to shut down 1,000 megawatts of old plants. We knew that our SOx, NOx, mercury footprint would be smaller. We knew the carbon intensity of our product would be better, and we saw this plant as a bridge plant. And it got us on the road of making this transformation and smoothing the cost impact out on consumers. And do it in a period where money's really cheap. In Indiana, we're building a coal gasification plant. It's the world's largest coal gas plant at 630, but we're going to retire 500 or 600 megawatts there. So again, it's a modernization plant. And as a consequence of building these two plants, we will retire an equal number or more of old plants that are 50 to 60 years old who have never been retrofitted for SOx, NOx, or mercury. So in my judgment, I'm reducing my environmental footprint, I'm making the transition, and the coal gas plant in Indiana will be the world's largest and the cleanest coal plant in the world. Most importantly, it's built in the middle of the coal fields, which gives us ability to do CCS, or carbon capture and sequestration. Because if coal is going to be in the equation in 2050, we've got to find a way to take carbon out of it. Whether it's out of the syngas stream when you gasify it, or out of the flue gas stream, and there are a number of technologies evolving to do both, but none are commercial yet. So one of the keys, quite frankly, is our ability to make that happen. But while I'm on what we're doing, I just don't want you to think we're just building more coal, because we're the third largest producer of electricity from coal. We're also the third largest producer of electricity from nuclear. And we have 2 nuclear plants on the drawing board, one down in South Carolina in Cherokee County, and one up in Ohio. because we think nuclear will be part of the answer in the future. And I might add, we're also building 1,000 megawatts of natural gas here in Carolina. But between those 4 plants that we're building, in the middle of this recession, we have 5,000 people at work. So not only are we making the transformation, but we're putting people to work, and we're doing it with private capital, not government money. And the point I'm trying to make is, we are the solution. We also, and I came out of Copenhagen thinking this, and maybe I should say this leading into that, because we produce so much coal, you can define our carbon footprint with 3 numbers. Some of y'all have heard me say this before. It's 3, 12, 41. We're the 3rd largest emitter of CO2 of all the companies in the US. We're the 12th largest emitter of all the companies in the world. And if we were one of the 190 countries in the United Nations, we would rank 41st. I don't share that with you to brag. I share that with you to show you the enormity of the challenge that we have decarbonizing our fleet and put in context the fact that we're advocating carbon legislation to regulate the emissions of CO2. Because we believe that's critical to the future of our country and our company. And we believe we can make that transition. I should say, being in Copenhagen and watching how the UN worked, it became crystal clear to me that I'm not applying for country status. Okay? That was the most remarkable negotiations to watch in my life. I think the process is broken. I think it's going to take multilateral. I think it's going to take the G20 or the MEF countries, or maybe the G2, China and the US, resolving this to move forward. So we need policy in this country, first and foremost. Secondly, in terms of technology, if you looked at, I guess I can mention another university, Technology Review by MIT, a little bitty university up there in the Cambridge area. They basically list the top 50 most innovative companies in the United States, and 7 out of 11 of them were energy related. Battery, solar, plug-in hybrid, to name a few. If you looked at Fast Company magazine, which listed the top 50, 2 were energy related. Now, I should say that technology is a key, public policy is a key, but because technology is such a key, we have created MOUs with 3 major companies in China. This is another area that might be worth a conversation if you have questions. But we have partnered with the Chinese for several reasons. One is we believe for an infrastructure business like ours, and given their challenges and their imperative to move people from the rural area to the urban areas, and their need for electricity, that they will lead the way on the development of technology. Think about it. They lead the world in the production of coal plants, 1 every other week. They're the #1 producer of solar panels, the #1 producer of wind turbines. They're building 14 nuclear plants, and we're not turning dirt on a single one in this country. Think about that. They're building batteries. They're building electric cars. I mean, even Warren Buffett invested in BYD, which is a Chinese company, because he believes at the end of the day they'll do it. And by the way, hundreds and thousands and millions of people are buying cars for the first time. And by the way, they have nothing to compare it to. So electric for them is exciting. It's very exciting for me too, I might add. But the fact is they will probably commercialize and bring the costs down of electric vehicles faster than we will in this country. They will prove carbon capture and sequestration faster than we will. That's why we partnered with China Huineng, because they have a green gen project identical to our project, except this is one of the few areas where we can say we're bigger. Our plant in Indiana is bigger than their plant in terms of coal gasification. The other thing is I love the Chinese, and I'm going to say this in a careful way. I love the Chinese because they have a can-do spirit. It's what our country was built on, was the same can-do spirit. I love working with them. They make things happen. Because our country is becoming more and more like our European ancestors. Spend some time in the EU. We're becoming more and more the chattering class. We forgot what made this country great, and that's being the can-do class. And so working with the Chinese has increased the metabolism of our own company and forced us to see the world through a little different lens and made us more aggressive and faster at trying to address these problems, because the Chinese have an economic imperative and they're building cities from raw dirt. They are making things happen, and we want to ride their wave. So not only are we sharing technology and people with them, but we're going to joint venture with them, investing in North and South America. We have a large operation in South America. And we're going to, it also leads to building relationships with Chinese banks and alternative sources of funds. And when you're a capital-intensive industry and you worry about trade barriers and you worry about the balkanization of financial markets, which we've seen having access, whether it's in the Middle East or China, and my preference for now is China, I would rather have access to the capital there than not. And if the market's balkanized, I want to have the capability to really access that. Let me conclude my comments with this. 2 points. First of all, our industry, our company is in a unique position to carry out our national policy. We're in the business of carrying out public policy. If they would establish a cap and trade system, put a cap on emissions and a price on carbon, we'll go to work, we'll provide the solutions, and we will make it happen. I believe we will stimulate the economy, we will create jobs, we will help people use energy even more wisely than they do today, which translates into productivity gains in the use of electricity. I believe it will lead to enhancing our energy security. I can already see ourselves weaning from coal. Well, that too, if we don't find CCS, but weaning ourselves from oil. If we go to plug-in hybrids or electric vehicles for cars, compressed natural gas for buses and for trucks. And I believe, by the way, we'll clean up the environment on the way. And actually, the way I just described it to you is the way we ought to talk about the climate issue. Because talking about it any other way has not been effective in motivating people across this country to embrace the issue, to understand the issue, and put pressure on our elected representatives to act. But if you put it in the context of let's get America's mojo back, I think this is one step in getting the mojo back. The second thing I want to share with you is this. And some of y'all have heard me say, and I know the dean's heard me talk about this. I often close speeches this way because I think it's a great way to think about it. And that's this. I believe in our country, we need cathedral thinking. We're so focused on the short term. I know in the financial community it's about next quarter, what your earnings is going to be next quarter or this year. It's not 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And anybody that's been in business understands you make decisions over the longer term if you focus on the short term, you're going to undermine your ability to really do the things that need to get done in the long term. And so cathedral thinking is something that we need in this country. And the reason I use that is the example. If you look, I've been to many of the great cathedrals in Florence, in Paris, in London, and all these great cathedrals, Rome, all these great cathedrals, one thing is clear. They weren't built in one generation, they were often built over 3 or 4 generations. The architect who designed it never saw it finished. The people who worked on the foundation and spent their entire life working on it never saw the walls, never saw the stained glass windows. Those who worked on the walls never saw the spires. And those that worked on the whole church were never able to envision all the weddings, all the baptismals, all the events, all the sermons, all the transformation of people's lives that would come in that cathedral. So why did 3 to 4 generations dedicate their life to the building? They did it because they had a vision. They did it because they believed in the future. They did it because they had faith. They did it because in their minds it was the right thing to do for the future. And we need cathedral thinking in our country. We don't seem to have it, because cathedral thinking is a little longer term than the term of a politician. And their focus is really on their term, not the long term. And it often is not the focus of a CEO who only lasts 5 or 6 years in the job. I'm an exception, because it's really about the term of being a CEO. I believe that you have a better chance to have a long-term view if you keep cathedral thinking front of mind. But don't make a mistake in what I'm saying. I believe we have to have cathedral thinking, but we need to do it on China time. Thank y'all very much. I can do it.
We have time for a few questions.
Okay, I'm expecting some tough questions because I just put a few issues out. Yes.
Given the likelihood that the legislative process is likely to be retarded for some reason, would you and your fellow CEOs agree to follow some voluntary standards? Because frankly, you're better at devising them than relatively uninformed legislators.
One of the things that's really key and a difference in what is now being proposed by Kerry Lieberman and Graham is that the utility sector would go first, and then the oil sector, and then the industrial part of our country. And we're prepared to go first because our industry represents about 40% of the emissions of all the CO2 emissions in the US. So yes, we're thinking about going first, but we want it done in the context of legislation rather than in a voluntary way. Because if I go to the state commission and say, I need to build this, or I need to build that, and they say to me, and I say, well, carbon is an issue, and we need to factor the cost of carbon in, and we don't know what it is. Let me give you some scenarios, and let me tell you that there is going to be legislation and regulation someday. Well, the consumer advocates quickly argue, no. It's unknown if there will be legislation. It's unknown what the price will be. So you need to do what is the most affordable thing for now, not what is the most affordable thing over the 50 years of the plan. And a great example of that is when we went to the commission and we asked them permission to do a solar on the rooftop here in North Carolina. We asked to spend $100 million doing it. And at the end of the day, guess what? The consumer advocate said, no, not 100, too expensive, do 50. Well, we've done 50. And the fact of the matter is, we've got rooftops with over 7,000 panels, one with 5,000 panels, all in Western Carolina. The other point is that we have the equivalent solar power equal to powering 1,300 homes in the Carolinas. And we believe that that's a really important part of moving forward, but that's a classic example of where, yes, it's more expensive to put solar on the rooftop, even though we can do it cheaper than everybody else, because the cost of our money's less. We already have the trucks and people, and we can make it. And when we put solar on the rooftop, we pay people to let us do it, because we see the rooftops of our customers as power plant sites, which is sort of a novel way to think about it. And I'll take your name and be delighted to pay you a fee. No. Yes.
Couple parts of this. Do you see waste to energy as part of our renewable future? And in particular, I don't know if you have any familiarity with plasma gasification and plasma torch technology for not only Canada Trail, but also for
Yeah, what I do know is waste to electricity. We have invested in that in the past. We actually have a joint venture with a French company to generate electricity with biomass plants, and that's really very important to do. I mean, the Southeast has a lot of potential biomass. The Pacific Northwest does, and actually ties into good forestry practices to do it right. And you have to kind of do it right on both counts. But yes, we see that as one answer, but just one. It's really going to be a small sliver of the total answer, but it's an important part. Yes, sir, and then I'm going to come this way.
Mr. Evans, thank you for coming here to Chapel Hill. I very much appreciate your high-level thinking, and the analogy to Cathedral is wonderful, but I don't think it's trickling down to the residential customers in our town. You said at the beginning of your speech that you would like to turn off the electricity for a week so people could appreciate what 1910 was like.
Please don't quote me on that.
That's a wonderful quote. But you did exactly that twice recently. Once in December of 2002 as a consequence of an ice storm here in Chapel Hill, and once in September of 1996 as a consequence of Hurricane Fran. Yet, as far as we can tell, nothing has changed with the power distribution system that would minimize these negative impacts of a week without electricity. I don't think your thinking is getting down to the distributional level.
Well, let me say that ice storms are probably tougher than hurricanes, actually, tougher than tornadoes. And ice storms are probably the most difficult. A lot of it has to do with the ice that forms on the branches and falls into the trees. And actually, in the early 90s in the Midwest, we had an ice storm that was so bad that it broke off 1,000 poles of transmission because of the wind blowing and the impact of the wind blowing, what they call galloping lines, and just snapped one pole and then snapped them all. So it took forever to rebuild that system. And so oftentimes people say, and I should say, when we cut trees in a way to improve reliability, you won't know the number of complaints. I get more complaints on tree trimming than any single thing. And actually somebody sent to me a hat that it said Duke Energy Chainsaw Massacre and had a picture of their lawn where we had cut their trees. They sent me a t-shirt too, and I don't often wear them. But my point is, there is a balance. We could put all this underground. That would make the reliability much better, solve the problem, more or less, because you wouldn't put the transmission. But you would not like the affordability part of that. So it's incredibly expensive. Even though we build underground today, when we build out new subdivisions in new areas, in existing areas, to go back and tear the streets up and put everything underground is extremely expensive. So it really gets back to that very tough choice. I mean, you talked about 96 and 2002. Is the cost versus the reliability, it's a trade-off. So if you're going to lose power for 7 days, twice in 15 years, is that reliability risk greater or lesser or more expensive than the cost of putting all these lines underground? And that's the trade-off that we make. And when we do that math, customers will live with 7 days, twice every 15 years versus 50 to 60% increase in prices to put everything underground. Okay, yes, sir.
Going back to the legislation question, I'm seeing in the news recent polls showing that the number of Americans who believe in the reality of climate change is at an all-time low, at least in recent years. So if we're talking about legislation, carbon legislation, realistically passing this year, there's a disconnect there. A lot of it is usually some of your own, some of it intentionally. How do you expect that the legislation will actually pass?
That's really a that's a tough question. Of course, Congress passed legislation on health care that most Americans didn't want either. I don't have a point of view on that, by the way. But this, when we've talked about this issue to the American people, we try to talk about it in terms of a moral obligation. When we talk to the American people about this, we show them a polar bear on a glacier or a piece of ice floating in the ocean. That didn't necessarily resonate with people. It does with some subset of people. When you talk about climate change, it's not like the smog in LA. You can't see it. It's not like a river that's contaminated. You can't see it or touch it or smell it. So it's very difficult to demonstrate to people carbon is an issue. And it's also very difficult to get people to say, well, everything's fine right now. And that's for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren to deal with, not for me. Because they walk out and they see that Carolina blue sky and they say, perfect. So you're really trying to get people engaged in an issue that has a long-term implications. I mean, the scientists are clear that the Earth is warming and that man-made emissions are contributing. But what there is uncertainty about is with respect to the timing and the impact, and it has an uneven impact across the world. Some regions are devastated if the climate changes. Other regions are actually improved. You might have a longer growing season in Minnesota, et cetera. And so what I'm saying is that it's a very difficult concept for Americans to grasp. One, because you can't see it or smell it. Two, because it's about tomorrow and not today. It's that short-term, long-term. And three, nobody's talked to them in a way they get it. And that is, particularly for our sector and for the electric sector, for the auto sector, I've already converted it to the electric sector, but for the auto sector, if we wean ourselves off foreign oil, that's about $400 billion a year. We're sending that money to people that don't like us. And they need to understand that going to electric vehicles is going to wean us from those payments. They're undermining the economy and supporting terrorism. If they understood that, they'd begin to get it. But if they also understood that we have to retire and replace every plant, and we might as well do it in a way that decarbonizes, because we represent 40% of the emissions, then people would say, great. But the closer for the American people is this: stimulate the economy, create jobs, energy security, cleaner air, and we get our mojo back as a country. If it was so that way, it'd get done. Yes, sir. The Earth's not warming. This is Exhibit A. And actually, some people have seized on the volcano, because the volcano has released all this SO2, and that's going to lead to our climate cooling down. I laughingly said, I've spent $5 billion on my power plants to reduce the SO2. I shouldn't have spent that money if I knew SO2 would really bring down. Just kidding. But, because there is such a thing as acid rain and downwind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My only point on this is that there isn't going to be that moment, that event. And by the time that happens, it's 75 years from now, or 100 years from now, or 150 years from now, and it's going to be too late. We're already in a place where we're having to mitigate. We're not going to change this overnight. I mean, there's some people that says we have to shut every coal plant down by 2020. They're nuts. We're not going to do that. We're not going to shut down half our economy by 2020. That's just not going to happen. And so the reality is we're going to deal with some kind of adaptation and cost of adaptation. And the question is, who's going to pay for it? And if our economy's in the ditch, you know we're not going to put money in a fund to send it to Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or any of these other places. We're going to use the money for ourselves. I mean, that's just practical politics. So I guess my short answer to your question is there's no single event that's going to do it in terms of people going, oh my God. Yes. Yeah, last question.
You mentioned that you're projecting gradual increases in rates in the future. What's your opinion on the future of rate making, the way that utilities are compensated for electricity and customer bill?
I have two strong beliefs. One belief is this: I want to change the regulatory regime at every state I operate in, so I'm incented to invest in energy efficiency. A lot of people use this phrase, decoupling. And decoupling simply makes me economically indifferent. I mean, can you name one great thing that's ever happened in the world because of economic indifference? I don't think so. But if you give me the same incentive to invest in efficiency as I have to build a power plant, if I build a nuclear plant, it's $12 billion. I would rather spend that $12 billion on energy efficiency, because on a risk-adjusted basis, it's a better set of investments for me to make. And I believe the most environmentally benign plant I will ever build is the one I don't build. So that's the first thing I would do, is change the incentive so I'm incented to really invest in energy efficiency. Some states have actually given utilities premiums on their returns if they'll make those investments. I think we're in the best position to do that than anybody. Lower cost of capital, relationship with the customer, and with the right regulatory regime, we can go to work and make a difference. The other thing that I would change in the regulatory regime is, because if I believe that rates are going to go up, I would much rather see, we have a rate system today where you file for rates based on a prior year, and you're kind of inclined to skip 2 or 3 years before you file. So rate increases are very lumpy. They're like 11 and 12% you announce. And people go, oh my God, 11 or 12%. That's the way the regulatory regime works. If I was king of the world and reshaping it for the 21st century, I would make formula rates. So every year you come in, you justify your cost, and you basically spread out cost increases over a long period of time. Rather than a 12% increase every 3 years or 4 years, I'd do it 3 to 4% type increases every year. People can plan on it. It's smoother. It's more predictable than having huge rate increases. And politically, it's better for us. It's better for the politicians because they don't have people screaming, which means it makes a better environment for regulators to act. And so it creates a better dynamic. And if you know for sure, and I'm really honest with the regulators because I've survived for 21 years because I believe in no surprises. So I tell them, and every time I give a speech, I talk about it. Rates are going to go up. Prices are going to go up. Let's get prepared for it. And I think formula rates would be one way to do it. So those were 2 changes that I would make. And I didn't pay you to ask me, but I would have. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure over the last 5 years to work with Duke Energy on innovation and some of their management programs. And a few years back, I was on my way to Charlotte to work with Brett Carter and his group on issues around innovation. And so as I got ready to leave in the morning, my son was sitting there at the breakfast table, and he is the ultimate Tar Heel fan. He's dressed in his Carolina blue, and he's sitting there, and he said, "Dad, where are you going this morning?" And I said, "Well, I'm on my way to Charlotte, and I'm actually going to help Duke Energy to become more innovative. I'm working with them on this innovation journey, and I'm excited about that." And I looked over at him, and I said, "Do you have any ideas that I should take to Duke Energy?" And he said, "I have 2. And I said, well, let's hear them. He says, "Well, first of all, they need to change their name. They should be Tar Heel Energy." I said, "Well, I'm not sure how they'll take that. What's your second idea?" He says, "Well, Dad, I hate to tell you this." He said, "But they should probably hire Roy Williams rather than you to consult with him." On behalf of the students, faculty, alumni, and friends of University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and of the Kenan-Flagler Business School, thank you, Jim Rogers, for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you.